evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the programme tonight, a two-parter. First up, a shocker from the International Monetary Fund. A key metric of the state of the economy shows that we may be in trouble. Bangladesh likely to overtake India in terms of per capita GDP. Now, that's the bad part of the story. However, the IMF does say that come next year, there will be a rebound. But the fact of the matter is, this key metric, when compared with the state of other developing economies in Asia and other economies in around the world, indicates that the state of our economy right now, the contraction of the economy, certainly gives us a lot to worry about. Also on the program tonight, the latest on the Tanishq controversy. A store in Gujarat has people coming in. A couple of the workers inside the store are threatened. They are told to apologize. A person in the store, the manager, actually does apologize. What is he apologizing for is the key question. He's forced to paste an apology on his storefront. Has Tanishq succumbed to fear and intimidation after it decided to pull an advertisement that celebrated diversity in India's interfaith marriages? Now, the Advertising Standards Council of India has had a complaint on this ad, but they say there is nothing vulgar or repulsive in light of the generally prevailing standards of decency and propriety in India. There is nothing here that can cause offense. That's going to be our second debate on this program tonight. But first, a quick look at that big economic development, what the International Monetary Fund has said about where India's per capita GDP growth presently stands.
A wake-up call for the Indian economy. While many have forecast a double-digit GDP contraction this year, the IMF has used another metric to show just how bad the slowdown has been, well before the pandemic. The IMF shocker projects Bangladesh is likely to overtake India in per capita GDP, thanks to rapidly growing exports. 5 years ago, India's GDP per capita was about a third more than Bangladesh's. This year, Bangladesh is likely to surpass it, even if by a whisker. This shows how rapidly it's grown compared to India, 55% versus just 17%. While India is forecast to rebound past its neighbor next year, the IMF projects that by 2025, Bangladesh will be ahead. However, the government says that India is actually ahead. Finance Ministry said, in purchasing power parity terms, India's per capita GDP in 2020 is expected by IMF at US dollars 6,284 as compared to Bangladesh's 5,139.
Indian economy has improved tremendously on all parameters. We are returning to pre-COVID period.
It's trying times for the Indian economy. So apart from the GDP, the focus will also be in ensuring that the fiscal deficit is kept under control and that whatever package that is being offered in terms of interest on interest will not burden the common man. With camera person Kanan Patra, Sunil Prabhu, NDTV.
Well, joining us now, Sunil Alag and Amitabh Dubey also to look at what the IMF has said. Thanks very much for being with us. Mr. Alag, let me come to you first. Besides that key metric on per capita GDP, what the IMF is actually saying is a matter of huge concern, because they're saying that India will be the third poorest nation in South Asia, with only Pakistan and Nepal reporting a lower per capita GDP. Bhutan, Bangladesh, Maldives and Sri Lanka will be higher. Now, I understand that when you look at this metric, you'd be asking, is this a case of a glass half empty or a glass half full? But for the moment, if you just look at this one metric, would you not say that we are in trouble?
Look, if you're asking me the question, we have been in trouble. There's no question in my mind. But if you look at the next 6 months, this is the next 6 months of the year, even RBI has come out, almost every industry is showing growth. Therefore, even if we get into a minus 9% at the end of this year, next year, everybody is projecting, I don't know about the World Bank, but everybody is projecting an 11% growth. Now, I don't know whether this has taken that into account in 2025. If we get into 11% for next year or 10 to 11% for 21-22, then automatically our trajectory will change. So IMF is predicting on certain assumptions And I believe in those assumptions, but the industry in India is not going on those assumptions. So we'll have to wait and see by month what happens now, because not by quarter, by almost every month, because Jan, Feb, March in 21 will
But
decide
why do
what
you call
happens
this an assumption? This is their analysis of what is the present situation. It's not an assumption. It's based on research.
But it's based on research of things which stand now. Nobody is projecting. If they are projecting for
Correct,
the future,
correct.
based on
No, but
happened now.
they've also, no, so Mr. Alag, they've done two things. They have not projected for now. They've come up with real data, their own data for now, but they are projecting for 2021. In fact, I wanted to ask Amitabh that. You know, it's bad right now, but they say that per capita GDP in dollar terms will rise to 8.2% in 2021. So Mr. Alag is right in that sense. It is the next couple of months and then things will get better.
So Vishnu, there is no doubt that once this disease has been dealt with, and hopefully it will be dealt with sooner rather than later, there will be a bounce back in the economy. So that part no one will disagree with. I think what is of concern, and this is a sad day for India or a good day for Bangladesh, should be congratulated. They overtook Pakistan a few years ago and now they're doing that to us. So good for them, but clearly something for us to take note. But remember, the economy was already decelerating before COVID happened. For the last 2 years since 2018, the reasons are well known. It's demonetization, it's the implementation of GST. And so we were already on a weak wicket before the shock hit us. And we are the worst affected emerging market economy with a negative 10 projected growth rate according to the IMF and negative 9.5 by the RBI. So there is agreement there. The other problem I see is that our fiscal response has been relatively weak compared to most other countries. So while there will be a bounce back, I'm sure, and I hope, my fear is that because of the bad policies of the recent past and a weak fiscal response to the very real distress that the country has gone through in the past few months, that our bounce back won't be quite as good as some of us hope.
Mr. Alag, in fact, it's not just Asia and Bangladesh, but our contraction of 10.3% is the third worst in the world, the third sharpest contraction after Spain and Italy. So, you know, in this period, is this not a recognition that, you know, as a result of perhaps not being able to control COVID in the manner that we had initially hoped for a few months back, our economy has taken a hit which is, some would say, catastrophic?
No, you know, look, I agree with you. The economy has taken a hit and we can keep on discussing the policies of the past, whether they were right or wrong. Look, when GST came in, I think when demonetization took place, I was not a great supporter of demonetization. I'm still not. But GST takes about a year or two to settle down in any country where it has got launched. So it's not a question of saying that, look, GST had to come. It was a demand of industry. It was a demand of everyone. Now, whether we are able to ride this out right now and what happens in 21, 22 and then onwards is what we have to go and see. Because if you carry on talking about the fact that I agree with you, look, when the supply side was taken care of in the fiscal policy in the first 6 months, I think the Prime Minister decided that the poor had to be taken care of first. Wrong or right, that was his policy. Now is the time when 300 million of the middle income group are going to get the demand side. Now, you know, in a way, India is one country which waddles its way through and then we get it right at the end of it. So ultimately, March of 21 is the quarter. If that shows the proper growth.
There are lots of ifs and buts on that, Mr. Alag. If we don't start rolling out that vaccine in the amount that we want to, if it doesn't have some sort of an impact, then, you know, I mean, there's no guarantee that next year is going to be very much better. I mean, one can only hope. But I just want to go back to Amitabh for a bit, because another key point, and this is what government sources are telling us, and they've had a look at this IMF report very carefully, and they're saying that they're not necessarily using the correct metric to analyze where India presently stands. So they're saying that look at purchasing power parity, and they're saying that India's per capita GDP in 2020 is estimated by the IMF in terms of PPP at $6,284 versus $5,139 for Bangladesh. So don't just look at one metric, look at this one as well.
Yeah. So the broader story, whatever metric you look at, the broader story is that Bangladesh is doing better than us in many economic indicators. Now, if they want to nitpick and talk about PPP, then the same people who are saying how India became the third largest economy during the Modi government will have to acknowledge that on a PPP basis, India became the third largest economy in 2008. So you can always pick a metric that suits your political agenda. I think the broader issue is, as Mr. Alag said, of course we are in a hole, and we can't blame Mr. Modi for everything that we're going through. But I think the policy response, to me at least, has been puzzling. It's been focused very much on the top end of the income group. Whether it's, of course, before COVID, you had the huge tax cuts for large businesses that did not translate into investment. And you'll remember they used up 145,000 crores of fiscal ammunition for that. Or most recently, the LTC policy for government servants. You remember that government servants are on the higher end. They haven't had any income losses. Their incomes are guaranteed, and the government is projecting the stimulus into them through this LTC policy.
Right.
Expansion of the fiscal stimulus was the bottom.
It's
the bottom is where you'll have
concern in terms of numbers, and I need to interrupt because I need to move on. But I think the one point we've not reflected on is Bangladesh and the state of the Bangladesh economy. Stable exports for the last couple of years, an increasingly stable agrarian sector, development at lower levels, and a pace of development which is something which a lot of people, perhaps a decade back, would never have expected. I think hats off to Bangladesh for managing to be where they are despite this COVID mess at this stage. I'd like to thank you both very much for joining us.